Hello, esteemed gentlemen? He figured it out, and now nothing controls him anymore. That's not a compliment. That's a warning whispered behind closed doors by the same people who can't stop watching him. Why? Because the Sigma male didn't just step off the grid. He decoded the matrix, reverse-engineered the game, and now operates in a reality where most people are still begging for validation, chasing fake status, and flexing insecurity in designer shoes. And while they're busy performing for attention, he's using silence like a scalpel, carving out a life so precise, so untraceable, it makes people question their entire existence. Here's a brutal fact. Studies show that the average person lies up to 3 times within 10 minutes of meeting someone new. Now, imagine someone who can spot those lies without blinking, pierce through fake personas like glass, and respond with nothing but strategic calm. That's the Sigma male. And here's what has everyone shook. They can't figure out how he did it, how he became immune to manipulation, how he lives without needing approval, how he became the ghost in the system, untouchable, unpredictable, and somehow always 10 steps ahead. So today, we're exposing it. 12 reasons they're in awe of you and secretly asking, how the F***CK did he figure this out? Grab your coffee, or your ego. One of them's about to get shaken. Number 1. You speak 80% through energy and 20% through words. Most people speak with their mouths. Sigma males speak with their presence. They walk into a room and shift the energy before a single word is spoken. Not because they're trying to dominate, but because their silence says more than most people's speeches. They've learned that real power doesn't beg to be seen, it simply is. And because of that, people start paying attention to them without even knowing why. A Sigma doesn't need to explain himself. He doesn't overshare. He's not scrambling to fill awkward silences. In fact, he lets the silence hang because he knows most people will reveal who they truly are when they're uncomfortable. That pause between what's said and what's felt, that's where he lives, that's his playground. While others are nervously talking just to feel accepted, the Sigma male observes, calculates, and lets his energy speak for him. His words, when he does use them, are sharp, deliberate, and minimal. There's no fluff, no over-explaining, just truth, delivered like a blade. This throws people off. They're used to manipulation, flattery, or people talking in circles to be liked. But when a Sigma speaks, it's surgical. He says exactly what he means, no dressing it up, and then goes quiet again. That contrast, it leaves people stunned. They remember every sentence because he doesn't waste any. He also knows that tone, posture, and presence are far more powerful than volume. You'll rarely catch a Sigma raising his voice. He doesn't need to. His stillness demands attention, and people find themselves leaning in, curious, trying to figure him out. It's not a game, it's not manipulation, it's just who he is, someone who's trained himself to communicate more with less. What makes this even more unnerving is that people feel like they're being read, completely and instantly, just by being near him. They sense he sees through their facade, their fake laugh, their performative confidence. And the truth is, he probably does. Not because he's psychic, but because while everyone else was talking, he was watching, listening, and decoding. This is why the Sigma male doesn't need to scream to be heard. He whispers, and the whole room leans in. Number 2, you solve psychological mazes in seconds. You don't just hear what people say, you decode what they really mean. Every word, every hesitation, every micro-shift in body language becomes data to you. While others get emotionally entangled in petty arguments, fake friendships, or drama cycles, you're already 5 layers deep, dissecting what's really going on. Not in a paranoid way, but in a surgical, detached, high-definition clarity kind of way. You've trained your mind to look beneath the surface. You don't react to noise, you listen for patterns. Most people can't see the manipulation in front of them because they want to believe the lie. You, on the other hand, see the contradiction in the smile, the weakness behind the arrogance, the hidden agenda in the harmless question. And by the time they finish their performance, you already know what role they're trying to cast you in, and you've already walked off the stage. This is why people feel both drawn to you and unnerved by you. They can't read you, but they feel read by you. You've solved them before they even finish their sentence. It's not about judgment, it's about awareness. You're not caught up in emotional chaos because you understand where it leads. You've seen the pattern 100 times before, and rather than play along, you calmly sidestep the trap. It's not that you're cold, it's that you don't waste energy. While others invest in fake connections, pointless arguments, or chasing approval, you're scanning the psychological terrain and deciding if it's even worth entering. And 9 times out of 10, it's not. What's terrifying to others is that you don't look like you're analyzing. You're not frantic, skeptical, or defensive. You're calm, polite, still. But inside, your mind is already running a silent audit of intentions, motives, and inconsistencies. People think they're dealing with someone normal, until you dismantle their entire psychological playbook with one sentence, one choice, or one exit. You don't get lost in other people's emotional mazes, you solve them, and then leave without leaving a trace. Number 3, you know the difference between loud power and real power. You learned early on that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. The one who needs to be seen, heard, and validated is often the one with the least real control. You watched people shout, posture, and dominate conversations, not because they had power, but because they were afraid of being overlooked. And that's when it clicked for you. Loud power is performance. Real power is precision. You don't speak to be heard, you speak to shift something. Every move you make is intentional, not performative. You don't flood rooms with energy just to prove you exist. You withdraw it, and suddenly everyone feels the difference. While others crave the spotlight, you pull strings in the dark, not to hide, but because you know that outcomes are shaped in silence, not chaos. You let others bark, boast, and fight for relevance. You're not threatened by it, you're studying it. Because while they're trying to be the center of attention, you've already figured out who they are, what they want, and how far they'll go for it. And when the show is over, you step in and make the real decisions, the ones that don't need an audience. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause, followers, or noise. It just works. You don't need to say, "I'm in control." You just are. And the people who truly understand power can feel it when you enter the room. Not through arrogance or ego, but through the unsettling calm that follows you. The kind of calm that makes people second-guess their behavior, their words, even their plans, without you ever raising your voice. This is what confuses people. You don't fight for dominance. You don't have to. Because you don't chase power in the way they expect. You carry it in your stillness, your presence, and the way you can alter a room just by not reacting. You don't need to be loud. You just need to be exact. And that's what makes you dangerous in the most unassuming way. Number 4. You withdrew from the spotlight and became the source. You saw what the spotlight really was. A trap dressed as validation. A stage built to keep people performing, begging for likes, and trading authenticity for applause. And while everyone else was busy trying to be seen, you stepped back, not out of fear, not out of insecurity, but out of clarity. You realized something most people never do. When you stop chasing the light, you become the one who generates it. You didn't fade into the background. You removed yourself from the circus. You stopped playing the game and chose solitude over spectacle. While others were curating themselves for attention, you were reinventing yourself in silence. No announcements, no updates, no need for approval. And then, something strange happened. Your absence started making noise. People who barely noticed you before suddenly wanted access. Not because you said something viral, not because you performed, but because your distance created curiosity. Your silence became mysterious. They couldn't track your moves anymore, and that unsettled them. Because the truth is, people are obsessed with what they can't understand, and you made yourself untraceable. You became the source by refusing to compete. You're not trying to outshine anyone. You're not measuring yourself by who claps the loudest. You've shifted from being visible to being undeniable. They don't just wonder where you went. They wonder what you know, what you're planning, what level you've accessed that they can't see. And now, the same people who once overlooked you are watching closely, analyzing every move, overthinking every silence. They chase your shadow because they feel something rare in it, something that doesn't beg, doesn't prove, doesn't pretend. You didn't just walk away. You ascended. You exited the spotlight and turned yourself into the source of gravity that pulls everything else in. And they don't know how the hell you did it, but they can't stop looking. Number 5. You don't just think outside the box, you burned the damn box. You were never interested in fitting in. Not because you're rebellious for the sake of it, but because you could see through the structure itself, the so-called box that everyone talks about thinking outside of. You realized it was just another pre-approved sandbox, a fake rebellion designed to keep people feeling like they're doing something bold, when in reality they're still following someone else's blueprint. So instead of trying to be creative within the lines, you torched the entire framework. You stopped asking where the boundaries were and started asking why they even existed. You don't adapt to systems. You dissolve them. You don't tweak ideas. You rewrite realities. While others try to make existing models more efficient, you scrap them entirely and build new ones from the ground up. That's why people can't predict your moves. You're not operating on the same map. You're not even playing the same game. And because of that, you're impossible to replicate. Imitators can copy your aesthetics, your phrases, even your posture, but they'll never recreate the architecture of how you think. What scares people is that you don't need permission to be innovative. You don't need approval to start building. You don't just question norms. You delete them and ask, what else can be possible if this rule never existed in the first place? And that level of mental freedom, it's dangerous. It makes people uncomfortable, but it also makes you untouchable. You manipulate time without showing your hand. While the world scrambles in a panic to keep up with trends, deadlines, and fake urgency, you move with surgical calm. You don't let the clock dictate your value. You control the tempo. You know when to pause, when to strike, and when to disappear just long enough for your absence to echo louder than any action. You use time not to react, but to build pressure. You stretch moments to make them mean more. You slow down not because you're lazy, but because you're calibrated. And then when you move, you create shockwaves. People feel like you came out of nowhere, but you were never gone. You were just moving in a dimension they hadn't unlocked yet. Number 6. You observe more in 30 seconds than most. See in a week. You don't enter a room to be noticed. You enter to notice. While everyone else scrambles for attention, you sit back and watch. Not out of shyness, but out of strategy. You've trained yourself to pick up on everything others miss. The tension in someone's jaw when they fake a smile, the microsecond pause before a lie, the insecurity hidden behind overconfidence. It's not magic. It's mastery. You absorb everything in silence. The tone of voice, the body language, the words that weren't said. You read people like data streams, decoding intentions long before they become actions. You don't need a long conversation to understand someone. You need 30 seconds, maybe less. Because while others are too busy thinking about what they'll say next, you're already 5 steps ahead, analyzing motives and mapping out dynamics. This is what gives you an unfair advantage. You're not distracted by needing to be liked or validated. That frees up your attention. And in that stillness, you gather the kind of insights that flip entire power structures. You learn fast, not by being told, but by watching the pattern repeat itself. You spot what most people don't even realize they're doing. You remember details people forget they revealed. You connect dots that weren't even supposed to be related. And because you don't interrupt, people reveal way more than they plan to. They fill the silence you create, thinking you're passive, when in reality, you're gathering the blueprint to their entire psychology. What makes it even more effective is that you don't announce what you've seen. You hold it. You wait. And then, when it matters most, you make one precise move that leaves people stunned because they didn't even realize they exposed themselves. You don't need hours, explanations, or backstories. You need a moment. One room, one glance, one shift in tone. That's all it takes for you to start rewriting the entire equation. And by the time people catch up to what you saw, you're already acting on what's next. Number 7. You broke up with approval like a toxic ex. You didn't just stop caring about approval, you divorced it. Clean break. No looking back. Not because you wanted to be edgy or different, but because you saw what most people never see. Approval is often a leash disguised as love. Compliments are handed out like candy, but most of them come with strings attached. Subtle expectations, hidden control, a silent demand to stay agreeable, stay predictable, stay small. You caught on. You saw how quickly praise turns to pressure. One day, you're being celebrated. The next, you're being resented for not staying inside the version of you they liked. You realized people don't clap because they want you free. They clap because they want you tamed. And that's when you broke it off for good. You trained yourself to live without it. Not in a bitter way, but in a sovereign way. You rewired your nervous system so it no longer craved applause to feel real. You stopped performing for approval because you saw how approval corrupts authenticity. It slowly chips away at your instinct, your originality, your decisions, until you're living for reactions instead of reality. And once you made that shift, everything changed. You started doing things that actually mattered to you. You made moves that didn't need an audience. You spoke truth even when it cost you attention. You disappeared when staying would have gained you followers. You said no when everyone expected yes. That level of independence makes people uncomfortable. Not because you're rude, but because you can't be guilt-tripped, flattered, coerced. You're immune to the reward system most people are trapped in, and that makes you dangerous because no one can bribe you with fake affection. Number 8, you have emotional X-ray vision. You don't need people to tell you who they are, you see it. You hear the words, sure, but you pay more attention to the crack in their voice, the flicker in their eyes, the shift in their breathing when they speak. You're tuned into the signals most people aren't even aware they're sending. That's why people feel uneasy around you. Not because you're cold or cruel, but because your presence strips away whatever mask they're wearing without you saying a word. You've developed a kind of emotional radar. You can walk into a room and instantly sense tension, insecurity, jealousy, or hidden motives, not in a mystical way, but in a pattern recognition way. You've seen enough people fake confidence, twist kindness, or weaponize vulnerability that now your instincts are sharp enough to call it out without needing to speak. And that's exactly what unsettles people. They don't know how you know what you know. You're not confrontational, you're not loud about it, but they feel exposed, like you're seeing something in them they haven't even faced themselves. And truthfully, you probably are. You don't read people to manipulate. You read people to protect your peace. To know who's real, who's posturing, who's broken but honest, and who's dangerous behind a smile. You don't get caught up in appearances, credentials, or charm. You get straight to the wiring, and if that wiring looks unstable, no matter how well dressed it is, you'll distance yourself instantly. You make people drop the act, not by force, but by presence. Your silence alone has a way of forcing truth to the surface. They feel seen. Not in a romanticized, poetic way, but in a raw, unfiltered way that leaves no room for their performance. And for those who depend on performance to feel powerful, that's terrifying. You don't call yourself intuitive. You don't label it. You just know things. You trust what you pick up. And you don't waste time explaining it. Because you've learned that when someone is hiding behind layers of lies, the most disruptive thing you can do is simply look at them like you already know. Number 9, you disappear to reinvent and return as the upgrade. You don't broadcast your growth, you disappear for it. While the world clings to constant updates, posting every half-baked step of a so-called transformation, you go silent, you unplug, you vanish. Not because you're lost, but because you're building. You understand that real change requires isolation, not applause, not external input, just stillness and truth. You're not interested in becoming a slightly improved version of who you were last year. You want to dismantle outdated programming, shed layers that no longer serve you, and come back as something entirely recalibrated. That process is messy, private, brutal. And that's exactly why you do it away from the noise. Because if you stayed visible, people would try to interfere, offer opinions, project their limits. So you disappear, without warning, without apology. While others are performing their evolution for validation, you're in the dark corners of your mind, confronting the hard stuff, ripping out beliefs you inherited but never questioned, scrutinizing your patterns, rethinking the way you think. And when it's done, when you've built the next version of yourself, you don't return looking for applause. You return with a blueprint that makes the old version of you and the old world around you completely irrelevant. And that's what shocks people. They remember who you used to be. They expect that version. But when you show up again, the energy has shifted, the rules have changed. Your responses are different, your boundaries are sharper. You no longer fit into the roles they assigned you, and that unnerves them. Because while they were busy assuming you'd stay in place, you were rewriting the entire equation. You don't evolve on display, you reprogram in silence. And when you return, it's not a reintroduction, it's a reminder. You are never who they think you are. You are who you decide to become. And you don't need permission to upgrade. Number 10. You know charisma is a weapon, not a personality trait. You don't rely on charm to get by. You deploy it when necessary. Charisma for you isn't a default setting. It's a calculated tool. Most people think being likable is about smiling, being agreeable, or saying what people want to hear. But you've seen how that kind of charm turns people into performers. You're not interested in performing. You're interested in impact. Your charisma is controlled, intentional, and sharp. You can turn it on like a switch, and just as quickly turn it off. You use it when it serves a purpose, not to be liked, not to entertain, but to disarm, to gather information, or to steer a situation where it needs to go. You don't waste energy trying to win people over. You read the room, identify what matters, and engage only when it moves the mission forward. That's what makes your presence feel intense. People can't quite pin you down. One moment you're quiet, almost unreadable. The next you're engaging, magnetic, commanding the atmosphere with just a sentence. It's not inconsistency, it's precision. You don't spread your energy everywhere. You direct it like a laser. And when you speak, people pay attention. Because you don't speak just to fill silence. You've studied how people respond to charisma. How quickly they trust someone who seems confident. How they mistake attention for connection. You saw through that game. So now, when you use charm, it's not to get approval, it's to get results. Whether that's diffusing tension, extracting truth, or gaining leverage, your charisma is never accidental. It's always tactical. And because of that, you don't chase likability. You don't soften your edges for comfort. You use what you need when you need it. That's what unnerves people. They can sense that you're not trying to win them over, and yet they still feel pulled in. That contradiction is what gives you power, because once they realize your charm isn't emotional, but strategic, they're no longer sure if they're in a conversation or a psychological chess match. You don't wear charisma, you wield it, not as decoration, but as a weapon. Number 11. You manipulate time without anyone noticing. You don't follow time, you engineer it. While most people are racing the clock, drowning in urgency, or wasting days on distractions, you move like time bends around you. Not because you work faster, but because you move smarter. You've trained yourself to see what time really is, a pressure tool. And instead of letting it crush you, you use it to orchestrate results. You don't confuse motion with progress. You don't fall for the fake hustle or the productivity theater that keeps people busy but powerless. You slow down with intention, and that silence, those pauses, rattle people. Because they expect panic, they expect noise. Instead they get stillness, focus, calculation. And when you move, it's precise, it's deliberate, and it shifts the whole room. You know when to disappear, not out of avoidance but as strategy. You go silent long enough to build tension, long enough for people to notice your absence, long enough for your next move to feel like a return, not just an action. That's what builds presence. That's what builds legend. Not in how loud you are, but in how masterfully you time your steps. You also know how to extend moments when needed. A pause in conversation, a deliberate delay in response, the ability to wait just long enough for someone else to overplay their hand. That kind of control isn't accidental, it's discipline. You've conditioned yourself to never rush under pressure, never fumble in noise, and never act just because time says now. Most people are owned by the clock. You use the clock as a weapon. You know that time reveals, time exposes, and time tests. And when you show up after that perfect, eerie silence, it's not just presence anymore. It's impact. Because people remember when you move, they remember when you speak, and they wonder how you make so little noise, but leave such a massive mark. You're not a slave to time. You're the one who rewrites its tempo, and no one even notices until it's already too late to catch up. Number 12. You killed the nice guy and birthed the sovereign. There was a time when you tried to be the nice guy. You held back truth to avoid tension. You overextended yourself to be liked. You watered yourself down so others wouldn't feel small around you. And for a while it worked. People smiled, approved, accepted. But deep down, you knew something was off. You weren't respected. You were used. You weren't being seen. You were being shaped. That's when you realized being likable was costing you everything. Your time, your energy, your self-respect. You saw how the nice guy mask wasn't kindness, it was self-abandonment, it was performance. It was a slow death by 1,000 compromises. So you did something most men never have the nerve to do. You killed him. You buried the people-pleaser. You stopped bending. You stopped begging. And in his place you built someone unshakable. You didn't become cruel. You became sovereign. You stopped playing roles in other people's scripts and started writing your own. Now you choose truth even when it makes people squirm. You speak directly even when it breaks the vibe. You hold boundaries so firm they echo, not because you want to be feared, but because you're done living for comfort, especially other people's. This version of you, he doesn't flinch when someone disapproves. He doesn't explain himself to people who don't deserve access. He doesn't apologize for existing in full form. And ironically, that's what makes people obsess. You no longer try to impress, and yet you're more magnetic than ever. Because in a world full of filters and fakeness, sovereignty is rare. It's raw. It's disruptive. You became the man who doesn't need to be liked to lead, who doesn't need permission to speak truth, and who doesn't need to fit in to have impact. You rewired yourself to serve your mission, not your reputation, and now you walk through life untamed, unmoved, and unforgettable. You didn't become the villain, you just stopped being the puppet. So now you know. While the world is still trying to decode surface-level charm and fake dominance, you've been mastering the unseen. You're not just ahead, you're in a completely different dimension of strategy, silence, and sovereignty. You didn't follow their rules. You erased the rulebook. You didn't fight for attention. You became the gravity. This isn't about being edgy. It's not about rebellion. It's about remembering that you were never meant to fit in, bow down, or be predictable. You're not here to perform. You're here to reprogram the game. And the crazy part, they can't figure out how you did it. But you know, because you built it, in silence, in solitude, in savage clarity. If this video hit different, if it spoke to that part of you that's always moved in silence, always thought deeper, and always walked alone with purpose, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the kind of content that actually respects your intelligence. Like this video if you felt seen, challenged, or sharpened. Drop a comment below. What resonated the most? What part of you did this speak to? Share this with someone who's quietly leveling up while the world's still trying to impress strangers. This channel isn't for everyone. But if it's for you, you already know it. Welcome to the few who get it. Stay uncommon, stay untouchable, and I'll see you in the next one.